On July 17th, the FDA announced that Juul Labs products are now authorized in the market. However, the vape market still has very little clarity, and that was a focus of a letter that NACS and several other groups sent to President Trump on July 18th. We're going to talk about both of those issues and what it means to retailers. Joining us for our conversation today is Doug Kantor. He is General Counsel for NACS, and he's involved with both of these things. So, let's start with the basic news about Juul. We have the vape business is a roughly $10 billion business. Juul is a major player in that. Talk about what that Juul announcement means.
Well, first, thanks for having me on. This is a really big issue for the convenience industry and for our members out there because there are these huge problems in the market. With Juul specifically, Juul has been something of a symbol of this vape or e-cigarette market for years. In fact, as FDA was going through looking at these pre-market approval applications for vapes and deciding what they would approve that could be sold in the market, what they would deny that could not be sold in the market, they initially came out and said, all Juul products are denied. That led to a very quickly filed lawsuit from Juul, and a number of folks, including NACS, getting involved and saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a problem. You don't have the information or the authority to do this. And FDA very quickly retreated from that position and said, oh, we're going to look at this some more. So Juul really has been at the leading edge of what is FDA doing here. And the approval may be a sign of a new day at the FDA with a new now Trump administration and some differences in how they're going to treat these things.
So speaking of the Trump administration, they had a hearing, the first term of President Trump, in the White House, and NACS President and CEO Henry Armour was one of the folks who was invited and had some he gained a lot of traction with the amount of time he was given to talk. Can you talk a little bit about how the Trump administration is thinking about this, both previous 4 years ago and today?
Yeah, it's been a strange journey with respect to these vapes. There was a real, let's say, public outcry about underage kids using vapes during the timing of that first Trump administration. That's part of what led to the big meeting at the White House that Henry Armour, among others from various industries, attended. And there were a lot of advocates out there who said, hey, the best way to deal with this problem in the vape market is to have them sold only in, quote, adult-only stores. And convenience stores, of course, are not adult-only. They're open to everyone. They sell a whole wide range of products. There are some stores that claim to be adult-only, but we all know, and more importantly, kids all know, that the idea that there's someone at the door screening people out is not quite so accurate. And so a big part of what was going on at the time of that White House meeting was really an education process for the Trump administration, which ultimately made the right call in saying, oh, this adult-only thing, actually, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And they got back somewhat on track of, okay, we got to go through, do these applications. Eventually, there was like a 2020 date of folks putting in these pre-market approval applications. And then everybody thought, oh, these will all be decided in a year and we'll have clarity in the marketplace. Great. It's 5 years later, Jeff. Not a lot of clarity in the marketplace.
And that brings us to point number 2, which is the letter that NACS and several other organizations have sent to President Trump. So Juul is authorized, and their products join, if I'm correct, about 39 other approved products, and that's it out of the thousands or tens of thousands of submissions that have been put together over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I think it's 39, including the Juul products, actually, out of those tens of thousands. The letter, and really appreciate the partnership with EMA, NATSO, Sigma, the National Association of Tobacco Outlets. All these groups have worked closely with us, and it's been an important thing that we're all together on this. The letter is really a summation of years of frustration, because what we see in the market today is chaos. Folks don't know what can and cannot be sold. There's not reliable information on that. And into that vacuum have come clearly illicit vape products, lots of them from China, but from other places as well to some extent. And it's a very difficult market to navigate, where the best actors who try the best to do the right thing take the brunt of the punishment because they lose sales to those who are willing to be unscrupulous. And that problem, look, sometimes these things develop just because of the nature of the market. This is a problem created by a regulator. And that is really a source of frustration. Should not be the case, but the regulators' unwillingness or inability to make clear decisions and provide clear information has set up the conditions where this is happening. And so that's what I think you see in the letter from all of these groups to the Trump administration is, hey, there's a new administration. You got to clean this up because this is a mistake of government here.
Well, even stronger than that, you use the word frustration. And in that first paragraph, there is the phrase for the center asking the Center for Tobacco Products needs to, quote, clean up this mess. And that's frustration that you see right there in the letter, that this is a problem. It's been 5 years. And part of that frustration is the letter also notes that this is not a problem of workload, but it's a problem of will. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, look, we have always recognized there were a lot more applications filed with the Center for Tobacco Products than anyone expected. And that did create a big workload. And perhaps, I think very fairly, they could have said, hey, the 1 year we initially thought it would take to decide all these things need more time than that. But they were silent about that. And it's now 5 years. That's an awfully long period of time to decide a bunch of applications. And what we have seen in the meantime is things like what I explained with respect to the Juul case, where a number of denials have led to the Center for Tobacco Products either backing away from their position of a denial, or a court telling them you're going to back away from your position of a denial because you're wrong about it. The problem that the agency has here is that there are a lot of products that probably should be approved that are very similar, that there's not much reason to distinguish and approve one versus disapprove another, but they don't like the idea of that many products being on the market. Unfortunately, what they've decided to date is that inaction, rather than making decisions they don't like and following the law, inaction is better and uncertainty is better. And so what we've said is it's not. It's just leading to smuggling and illicit product and giving the market over to Chinese companies that are willing to flout the law, literally. But when you don't know what the law is, it makes it easier for people to flout it.
And of course, when you talk about bad actors that really are less careful about what they sell and what they don't sell, they're probably less careful on age restrictions and a whole bunch of other things. So this involves a lot more than just who is selling; it's how they're selling. One other thing, we are steeped in government relations and in some terminology, but vape and e-cig. Just want to clarify a couple things before we go much further. Vape and e-cigarettes. When we talk about those two things, we're talking essentially about the same things.
People do pretty much use those terms interchangeably. Yes.
Okay. And the other thing is when we talk about FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Center for Tobacco Products, the Center for Tobacco Products is within FDA. So when we use those two terms, that's what we're talking about.
That's right. Yes. The Center for Tobacco Products is the unit of FDA that's really responsible for all of these decisions. There is obviously, because they're part of the broader Food and Drug Administration, there is some oversight there. But yes, both entities are intertwined in that way.
Okay. And when you were talking about the three problems that the letter outlined, now, was it just coincidence with Juul's announcement, the announcement about Juul, and this letter that both happened within hours of each other?
So in a way it was coincidence, but here's the way in which it's not coincidence, in that I think the new administration does recognize that there's a glaring problem here. The industry has talked about it for years. Members of Congress have talked about it for years. There have been congressional hearings. So I think there's a recognition that things need to happen. And so to that extent, there's a lot of people saying, hey, things need to happen. And thankfully, we see this beginning of action from the Center for Tobacco Products. That's great. It's a good sign. It's a good first step. But there was no direct line between the two things happening at the same time, other than, I think, just pressure building for a while that, gosh, we need movement here.
And so identifying the three problems, and we essentially talked about them already, but the three problems outlined was there are very few products that have been approved. We're talking about a couple dozen out of tens of thousands. Number two, there's no information on which products have been denied. So you don't know if there's something, everything feels in limbo because there is no clarification that something has been denied. And the third is, of the products in legal limbo, there's really no clarity about what that limbo involves. Is that the best way to summarize the 3 points of, let's call it frustration, but it's more than frustration?
That's exactly right. And let me talk about that second point for just a moment. The not having information about the denials. FDA has put out a list of the manufacturers that have had denials, but they don't say which specific products have been denied. And some of those manufacturers are listed more than once. So it's not as though you can say, oh, if they list a manufacturer, that means all their products. You can't make that determination. We have asked multiple times, the rest of industry has asked many times, members of Congress have asked many times, hey, Center for Tobacco Products, just tell everyone what are the actual products that have been denied. And they have refused to do that. It is mind-boggling. What regulator would ever say, oh, you can't do certain things, we're just not going to tell you what they are? I have told many people over the years, we're actually living in a place where a unit of government says, you're on double secret probation. We're not going to tell you, but boy, if something happens, you're in big trouble. Well, thanks very much. That's not very useful if you're actually trying to follow the law.
And last week we were talking about consumer surveys, and there was a reference to an Adam Sandler movie and a Hobbit movie. For those of you playing at home, that was a reference to an Animal House quote. So well done.
Yes, Dean Wormer would be proud of the Center for Tobacco Products right now.
And the little known codicil. So we have roughly 40 approvals in 5 years, 8 a year. That's obviously inadequate. And the letter, continuing conversations with all these groups, with the government, expressing frustration. And we also should say that it's not just saying there's problems, it's identifying solutions. And let's kind of walk through, we do have some solutions. Number one, you want the Center for Tobacco Products to provide clarity. And that is, we've talked about that. It's pretty clear that's important. Is there anything else related to that in terms of the recommendation?
So, yeah, look, just tell everybody what you can, what you can't sell. That should be clear. Frankly, on that point, we've said many times, and this will get into other parts of the recommendation, we'd all be better off even if they just denied everything, because then they would lose a bunch of lawsuits, and then we'd have clarity that, oh, those products are the legal ones you can sell. But yeah, the first thing is they've got to tell us what has been denied, what has not been denied, et cetera.
And so number two is supercharge the multi-agency task force. Talk about that.
Yeah. So last year, they along with the customs folks and others in government did announce a multi-agency task force to intercept shipments of illicit product, to get them off the market. They have brought some actions here, but we need more. And that's really what that boils down to, is we need enforcement. You got to have clarity, and then you got to enforce the law and get the bad actors out of the market, get the bad product out of the market.
And number three of the recommendations involves customs and border protection.
Yeah. I mean, this is, we all know a huge number of the products that should not be sold are coming in from China. And the easiest way to get them is before they get into stores and before they get into the supply chain. Stop them at the border, stop them at ports when they're coming in. If that would happen, it would make things a lot easier in terms of cleaning up the market.
So NACS and these other organizations are very invested in moving this forward and getting clarity and in addressing these problems and moving forward with the solutions. Is there anything that NACS members, retailers, others also should be doing or thinking about as this evolves?
Well, one is NACS members have to watch their own compliance as best they can. There are challenges to that because of the clarity, but there are things that we know, and the more that legitimate operators do to try to clean up their own operations and make sure that the better. Certainly, if they then see other folks in their market who are not doing a good job at keeping illicit product out, letting us know, letting the regulators know, letting the enforcement folks know, that is useful. Everybody needs to be aware of what's happening out there in the marketplace. And, from the government relations side of things, we have worked with a number of our members over time to be loud and clear with their members of Congress and other officials. And so when we ask, we will say, please. We know where the buttons are to push, and so having our members with relationships do that is always useful.
So we're only a couple months into the new administration, and 5 years was a long time to get anywhere. We're getting somewhere, but it's not nearly enough. I don't want to ask for the crystal. Okay, I am going to ask for the crystal ball. Any thought about what might be next? Will we be talking about months, years, half decades? What might be a reasonable guess at what is next?
So I don't know for sure what's next. I wish I had the crystal ball. I just don't. But we have had some indication that the Trump administration does understand there are problems here. The president himself made statements about, make something along the lines of making vaping great again and cleaning up this market. So we are encouraged, but what exactly happens and how quickly we certainly can't know for sure. We are looking forward to working with the administration on dealing with these problems, and certainly, as I said, it looks like they have some interest in trying to deal with these problems. So we'll take that. That's a good starting point, and we'll have to just go from there.
Well, Doug, thank you for joining us today. When oftentimes when we have these conversations on Convenience Matters, they're about issues that are less timely. And Doug, you seem to come in you do come in when we have these breaking news items that just require immediate analysis and getting them out to our members on very short notice. So appreciate finding the time in your schedule. And we will be talking more as this moves along, and a whole bunch of other issues related to government relations and what we do here at NACS. So thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Always a good time.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.